For those who have been in a coma, what was it like? I was in a very short coma, 6 days, after a brain hemorrhage. I recall nothing during the coma. I have a fuzzy understanding of my first week or two after waking up, having pieced it together by the stories I was told, and memories of the day, or days leading up to it, were temporarily wiped out, though they have since returned. This was over a decade ago, so take this with a grain of salt. My memory in general is imperfect at best. I should mention that my coma was induced so they could stabilize me and drain the blood via my skull. 10 days I don't remember anything about. Not sure if it is a blessing or a curse. Hit by a drunk driver. My wife and I lived, but our daughter didn't. To me, that stuff on TV where the patient wakes up and everything goes back to normal is bullshit. When I woke up, I was in a conversation with another patient. Air Force had sick bays, not individual rooms. I can only compare it to a computer. I had been hung in an update and then flicker, new screen. I had woken up several days earlier, but nothing stayed with me. My wife says I was paranoid that they were putting acid in my IV because I was tripping. I was hostile and aggressive. I read the medical records. They kept me restrained for a couple of days after I hit a nurse. I started acting normal, so they moved me from ICU to the sick bay. The blessing is forgetting 10 days of some pretty intense pain. I was broken in a lot of places and bruised in all the rest. Never knew you could bruise some of them. That freaked me out. The curse was I wasn't there when my wife needed me most. There is that tinge of guilt that she faced that grief alone for 10 days. I know, couldn't be helped, not my fault, but live through it and tell me how it feels. I had meningitis when I was 12, which got misdiagnosed for stomach flu and ended up with me being taken to the hospital last minute. The last memory I had was falling asleep watching the emergency news on the Brussels airport attack. I later on had a sort of fever dream, which ended up to be true, about my parents driving me to the ER saying, "It's okay," over and over again. I couldn't move or talk, so it seemed more like a dream than something that was actually happening. I saw the lights of the ER parking lot, which made me close my eyes, and after that, it was like taking a nap. I had no awareness of time at all. It's like going to sleep and just waking up what feels like a second later, but it's actually morning already. I woke up 6 days later, highly drugged, but only gained consciousness the day after. My first memory after waking up is opening my laptop in the hospital bed to play Minecraft. I have no idea what happened or what I said when I woke up before that. Not me, but my dad has described his coma after his car accident. He was pulled up a little too far at a stop sign, and a guy who was speeding and on his phone swerved off the road. So he was in a coma for about 2 months. On my end, it wasn't like the movies. He didn't just wake up miraculously. It was 2 months of steady improvements. One eye opened, then a few days later, his other eye was half open, and then he could wiggle a toe. Then he could move his fingers, etc. On his end, he said he could hear bits and pieces of what was happening around him, but it was like a dream that he couldn't wake up from. When me and my 2 younger siblings would come in and talk to him, his heart rate would go down. When a football game was on and his friends came to sit with him and watch it, the nurses made them turn it off once his team started losing because his heart rate blew up. He's a fan of the Miami Dolphins, so I guess his heart rate never fully returned to normal. There was a kid named Martin Pistorius who fell into a coma for 12 years, but his mind woke up 2 years into it. However, he was unable to speak or move, and everyone believed he was a vegetable at best. This wasn't the case. His mind was fully there. For over half a decade, he was mistreated in facilities that played Barney repeats every single day for years without him being able to look away. True mental torture. He was also physically and sexually abused on top of that. At one point, he couldn't stop throwing up, so the nurses tube-fed him his own vomit. His parents were unaware of all this and tried adapting the best they could. In some of the lowest moments, he remembers his mother telling him she wishes he would just die. Yet, All he could feel was compassion for how she felt. Eventually, someone who cared enough realized he was responsive enough and got him the help he needed. And now he has a wife and kids, talks like Stephen Hawking, and is a computer programmer. It really shows how you can still emerge from the deepest, darkest places of life. If anyone is wondering, it happened to him due to cryptococcal meningitis. Fungus covered his brain and spinal cord. The disease comes from soil with infected bird droppings being inhaled. One day, he was just an innocent 12-year-old playing outside, only for his life to be changed because of simply breathing in some kicked-up dirt. Glad he came out on top in the end. I wasn't in one for long, just under a week. While I was in the coma, I didn't remember a thing. When I came out of it, I just remember hearing my mom yell to the attending, "He's up!" Then I woke up with a bunch of white coats in the room. I was super stiff and incredibly confused. Oddly enough, I kept having vivid dreams of myself in the coma after the fact. Still have them to this day. They're almost like an out-of-body experience because I can see myself laying in the bed with people around me. In 2016, I was in a coma from March 31st to May 5th, then half awake for another month after that. It was like the longest, scariest dream of my life. I was medically induced by a fentanyl drip for about a week at first, and let me tell you, fentanyl is a demon. Wacky dreams about fighting corrupt hospital officials so my brain knew where I was. They didn't think I'd ever talk or walk again, but in the hospital bed, I laughed at an episode of That 70s Show and inclined every day after, putting me at about 85% health overall these days. Pretty much an average guy. Oh, it was a head injury. Had a seizure in the bathroom that made me fall onto the sink. I can only compare it to when you're little and wake up at a friend's house and don't know where you are. I was in a coma for 2 months after a bad car accident. It wasn't medically induced. It was thanks to brain damage. When I woke up, I was alone in the hospital room and had no clue what happened or why I was there. I had a neck brace on due to a broken neck, so I figured something was wrong with my neck, but was unsure how or what happened. For some reason, I thought I was 60 years old. I was in my 20s. I was paranoid and scared, but didn't know why I was there. I used context clues to figure out I was in the hospital. It was frightening. After about 5 minutes, I decided to go back to sleep. 2 months of sleep wasn't quite long enough. When I was in 5th grade, I fell out of a tree and bonked my head pretty well. I woke up 3 days later in the hospital. For me, the experience is easily summarized in 3 parts. 1. When I fell, I blacked out before I hit the ground. Or at least that is where my memory fades. And fades is really the best word. It was as if my consciousness was drained away, and then blackness and nothingness. It was as if my body knew how badly it was going to hurt, and so it shut down. 2. I have very, very, very vague memories while in the coma of hearing my dad reading a book or my mom telling me that she knew I would pull through, or of a tube in my nose. But these were always super fuzzy moments and I was never conscious during them. It was more like a half second of being aware of one particular thing. The way the tube felt being taped against my arm and wishing I could reach out and move it, and then back into the nothingness. I think that I was somewhat aware of the fact that I was a little more aware each time that this happened, but honestly, I am not certain of even that much. 3. Waking up was sudden. So sudden. I was in blackness, had a moment of awareness like my neck hurts, and then the pain was magnitudes higher. No longer a distant perception, but something that I was actively conscious of. Waking up was the most painful moment of my life, and I just started crying and then couldn't even cry, it hurt so bad. I think that had more to do with injuries sustained in my neck and head than the coma, but this is what it was like. After an hour, my body was used to the pain and I was totally normal, albeit very weak, hungry, and thirsty. I survived and am fine now without any lasting issues. I was in a coma because I fell 15 meters and broke nearly all of the bones in my back, and it was horrible. When I woke up, I thought the nurses were torturing me and that I need to escape. I started hallucinating a lot and couldn't even understand that I am in hospital. The biggest problem were my dreams. I thought I was a time traveler or some kind of god. I thought I was shot by the police and other shit. I still have flashbacks to this day, and it is no fun. But I am getting therapy to deal with it, and I could watch porn in my dreams, so yeah. It was confusing and horrible at the same time. 0 of 10 would not do again. Not my story, but on a previous post asking this question, there was a guy who talked about having a whole second life while in his coma. He talked about vivid memories of his family and friends. He met a woman and they had kids together. Then one day, he was sitting in his lounge and started staring at this lamp. There was something off about it, but he couldn't tell what. He stared at it and kept staring all throughout the night. Then he realized the lamp wasn't real. Suddenly, he started recalling his real life and woke up from his coma. He said that to this day, he still grieves the loss of his family from the coma. I believe he said sometimes he sees his coma children in his dreams. It was really interesting and depressing. If anyone can find that comment, let me know. I'm grateful that Redditors seem to have the uncanny ability to dig up comments that are over 8 years old. Turns out, in this instance, it wasn't a coma, and the guy was just out cold for however many minutes. Still a crazy story. To all you reading the story for the first time, I apologize for your collective existential crises. Reposting from another thread that I talked about it. 2 weeks induced because of swine flu. During this time, Oprah announced she was ending the Oprah Winfrey Show. I was very upset to learn this after the fact. Mostly because the TV in my room plus the drugs that they gave me to keep me under gave me the most cinematic dreams I've ever experienced. Somehow, the news of Oprah retiring filtered into my brain as dreaming about saving the whales with her in a submerged Chicago. We had champagne brunch. It was excellent. I was also a superhero who could fly and fought my enemies on the rims of volcanoes. And then I woke up, and not only could I not fly, but my buddy Oprah had betrayed me into retirement. I was crushed. The kid I went to middle school with spent 5 months in a medically induced coma waiting for a new heart. He said that in dream time, it was equivalent to several years during which he could fly and was stronger, but also had to fight clowns with chainsaws. He was aware that he was in a coma, but couldn't really do anything about it. Obviously. Interestingly enough, there was a point in this dream where he was tasked with doing something that was literally impossible, and he was somehow able to do it. In the real world, I believe medical professionals at one point said it was literally impossible for him to recover. I'm not sure what health complications were happening during this time, or if this was pre- or post-transplant. I know this will get buried, but I'll post my experience anyway. I went to the hospital with renal failure and a pulse ox reading of 32. I remember the nurse saying my pee looked like root beer, and when she stabbed my arm to give me an IV, all she said was, "Uh-oh." My arm got really warm and my dad moved my head so I wouldn't see how much blood was coming out. Next thing I know, I'm in a hospital bed tearing through the desert at 60 plus miles per hour. Nothing but me in a hospital bed. No motor, nothing. Just cruising through the deserts. I'd see all sorts of weird things. Most specifically was Ronald McDonald. I saw him all the time. Then my hospital bed would come to a screeching halt and I'd be in the living room of someone I knew. Grandma, good friends, former coaches. Basically, any living room I had spent time in with someone I cared about. The weird thing was, the living rooms were always 3-walled. One wall was missing, and beyond that wall was a barren desert. We would talk for a while about God knows what, then I'd be pulled back into the desert, cruising at 60 miles per hour again. It happened over and over again. Sometimes the same living rooms would reappear, but almost all of them were unique. When I came out of the coma, everyone kept commenting how good my hair looked. I couldn't figure out why they kept saying that, so I finally asked my mom how long I had been asleep. She said 13 days. And I had cards and flowers from all these people whose living rooms I'd been visiting in my coma. It was surreal, and I definitely can't explain it, especially since most of the cards came from people who weren't allowed to visit me in intensive care and were sending well wishes in writing, not in person. I got in a dirt bike accident during the summer between grade 8 and 9. I don't remember much about the day or two before, just kind of flashbacks like a dream. I woke up in the hospital a day or so later. To me, it was like sleeping. All of a sudden, I woke up. I did have some memory loss, though, which lasted for a couple of hours. This memory loss was different than just not remembering the day or so before. I woke up and although I knew my parents and everything, I didn't remember the previous few years of school, like graduating from grade 8. It was a full-on panic attack. I thought I was going to have to repeat a couple of grades, and then essentially I was mentally handicapped. This was the 80s, so I didn't use that exact term. Everything did come back, but that hour after waking up still haunts me. I work as an RN in the ICU, mostly medical these days, but I also work in trauma/surgical/neuro and occasionally cardiac. And most of my patients, especially now with COVID, are under deep IV sedation. We use everything from IV opiates to benzo, sometimes ketamine or dexmedetomidine. The ones that always seem to be kinda there are the ones on ketamine. I can't imagine the confusion of having someone touching you, cleaning you, the bright lights, all while in a fucking K-hole. ICU delirium is a real problem, and there are many people that come out of their experience with intense PTSD. Whenever I do anything to or for a sedated patient, I always try to remember to tell them where they are, what day and time it is, and why they're in the hospital, even if I just told them a half hour ago. I don't know if it helps, but it's what I would want for myself for sure. Wear a mask, please, unless you are okay with the possibility of having a machine breathing for you in a weird dreamlike waking nightmare where you have a tube in your urethra and your butt, and someone has to come and poke at your wrist artery multiple times a day. We try to make it as comfortable and atraumatic as possible, but shit, dude, the ICU is a horrifying place. Not me, but my dad. He was in a coma for about a week after riding his bike head first into a telephone pole. He says that he remembers the accident itself, followed by an out-of-body experience. He remembers flying high above the scene of the accident and looking down at his body laying there lifeless. He remembers seeing a woman from the neighborhood rushing over to see what happened, and other neighbors brought out a flat beach chair to put him on while waiting for the ambulance. After he woke up from the coma and immediately broke down crying as the influx of stimulation and confusion poured in, his brain was stuck about 5 or 6 years in the past. He remembered his phone number, address, etc., but from years ago, and he couldn't remember the current info. It took about 2 weeks after coming to for his brain to catch back up to current day. The spookiest part? He went to the house of the woman who he had seen first from above and asked if she had been the first to get there, and other info about what he saw from outside his body, and she confirmed all of it. Pretty wild. I've been in 2 medically induced comas. Both times, it was like being in a dreamless sleep. I was unaware of time passing, which was weird, waking up and then being told it was Thursday when I last remembered it was Monday. I don't remember anyone talking to me, but my mom said she spoke to me every day, and the only time I would react was when she mentioned a certain name. She said whenever she said this name, my eyes would flutter. Other than that, there was no response at all. It's also very confusing the first 30 minutes at least, as the drugs are still wearing off, you're intubated, have a nasogastric tube for feeding, a central line for drugs, and a catheter for urine. All of this is usually removed, which isn't pleasant, and you're still trying to wake up and make sense of your situation. I would say not one of the top 10 experiences to have before you die. I was in a medically induced coma for 3 days during my cancer treatment. My identical twin brother died around a year prior. also to cancer. And the entire time I was in the coma, I was with him. We were in a large green field with lots of sun, and my conversations with him felt real. Other than that, I didn't hear any of my family talking to me while I was asleep. It was just like I had gone to bed for 3 days, and I woke up feeling very tired. I do wonder whether my interactions with my twin brother were real, or if it was just the drugs I was given causing them. It was odd and very interesting. I think you'll like this answer. It may be unique. I was playing a lot of Halo 4 at the time, and I also had that weird Android Galaxy Live wallpaper. So when I was knocked out for over a month, I saw that Galaxy spinning around as if it were a Halo 4 loading screen. And what's really weird is I remember that odd thing being at the bottom right of the screen that said, "Don't turn off your Xbox 360 console." Honestly, being there too. Kinda weird and cool. I don't know. I was in that area of my mind for about 30 seconds, and then I woke up. I was put in a medically induced coma after a car accident in which the driver fell asleep at the wheel, swerved off the road, and my car flipped over 3 times. I suffered a brain bleed and traumatic brain injury and was operated on, with the doctors removing a piece of my skull to relieve the pressure. I was put under for 3 weeks, and I remember distinctly having a 2-week-long dream. I don't really know how I knew it was 2 weeks long, but I had a variety of really weird dreams. The dreams included scenarios like 1. I was a box of ginger ale, and I was in a race against a box of Dr. Pepper in a supermarket. We both had a shopping cart we were on, and I barely won against the Dr. Pepper. After that, I wanted ginger ale for weeks. 2. Something involving a bunch of ninjas and a boat and an assassination that was going to occur. 3. I was a fish stuck in some kind of enclosure that I had to escape. 4. I was in some kind of turf war with my fraternity. They were just my friends, against a rival fraternity. And we both had battleships. Gravy and mashed potatoes were involved somehow. 5. I was trying to escape this hospital I was at, but I was too weak to walk and could not figure out how to get out of my bed for the life of me. When I woke up 3 weeks later, I was a little confused and had to piece together what happened from bits and pieces the doctors had told me. I would laugh very easily, like just from random phrases my friends who would visit me were saying to me. I had to undergo rehab for 3 months afterwards, learning how to walk and talk again. The doctors told me that my recovery was pretty fast. I still suffer from impaired concentration and energy levels, and I managed to get prescribed Adderall for that issue. One positive out of that, I guess.